We meet today to prepare for the return of the Dáil, to consider the forthcoming budget, to consider the solutions that Sinn Féin needs to bring forward in terms of housing and health and all of the challenges that face people in their day-to-day lives. We're meeting here on the border pretty much at a time when Brexit threatens and looms, at a time where there is a real possibility of a crash or a hard Brexit. So we will be discussing that, considering the way forward and the means of protecting this island, our economy, people's livelihoods in the short term but also in the long term. We have a number of people coming in to join us for panel discussions to talk about Brexit, to talk about Irish unity, but also to talk about campaigning and planning for change, for delivering solutions to people who now at a time of uncertainty wish to see their livelihoods and their jobs protected and want to know that there's a plan, that there's a bigger plan for Ireland through Brexit but also beyond Brexit. So we're joined by MLAs, MPs, Teachta Dála, senators. We also have people who are involved in organising and campaigning for the party on the ground. And we, of course, are preparing for elections. It's very clear now that a Westminster election is imminent. In the south, we face into perhaps by-elections, but certainly a general election over the next number of months. And we will be prepared for all of that. Our election last summer was disappointing for the party, but we've taken stock, we've regrouped. We're here, we're ready. Sinn Féin is still the third largest party in the south, as it's called. We're a very large national organisation, the only substantial national Irish political party, and hundreds of thousands of people look to us to represent them. They put their faith in us, and we will never let them down. Not now, and not ever.
What about at the moment about the backstop again and the possibility of a Northern Ireland backstop or only or backstop light? Assurances given to the DUP, they say that there will be no border down the Irish Sea. What do you think is happening, and should the DUP ultimately have the final say, or indeed Stormont have the final say on what is agreed?
Everybody needs to act collectively and responsibly to protect this island, to protect people's livelihoods, to protect our economy, to protect our farmers, to protect our society, but above all, to protect our peace agreement. And the DUP know, just as we know, that Brexit is totally incompatible with the Good Friday Agreement. Everybody knows, and the DUP know, that people in the North did not consent to Brexit. Brexit does not have the consent of people living in the North. The DUP do not speak on behalf of the majority view. In fact, they have very recklessly pursued a course of action that will seriously damage people's livelihoods and prospects, and they're doing it with their eyes wide open. So no, there should be no veto in the protection of Irish interests. The negotiation on Brexit is between the British government on the one hand and the European institutions on the other. The DUP, the Assembly, nobody can have a veto in delivering what are very, very necessary and bottom line protections. They're not green protections or orange. It's not a nationalist or a unionist demand. This is the position of Ireland. This is the position that has been articulated consistently since Brexit came to pass, and this is the position that now must be adhered to. It should be remembered that the backstop, this idea was first actually brought forward by Sinn Féin as a solution for the island of Ireland. We were very clear from the beginning that we required a bespoke solution for the island. to ensure special designated status within the European Union. At the time when we forwarded that solution, we were told that it couldn't happen. All of the other political parties said that it wasn't deliverable, but we knew that it was necessary, and now here we are. A backstop has been formulated, the solution is on the table, and now it's for people to open their eyes, to listen to the voices north and south of business, of agriculture, across every sector of society that says we need an answer, we need a solution, we need protection. So the answer to your question is no, the DUP must not have a veto on protecting Ireland's basic rights.
I'll take Joe, and I'll take if there's Tracy, and is there anybody else? And Fikra.
You say that you've taken stock of the electoral setbacks that you've come through in the last year, and that you're talking about budget solutions here, your solutions to the budget. But how has the message of Sinn Féin changed to ensure that you don't suffer further setbacks, given that there are elections and a lot of elections coming down the track?
I'll take Tracy and then Fikra first.
Just to follow on from Gareth's question, so are you saying that the Sinn Féin is the backstop or nothing, or would you be prepared to accept any other special arrangement as long as there is no input from government?
And then just Fikra, and then
Sure. Mary, just on a slightly separate topic, Martin was asked yesterday from the Forest Equivalent of the meeting today, would he be in favour of agreeing a specific election date with the overall part in order to remove any confusion about what might happen over the coming months? He said he wouldn't be, but do you think he's wrong? I think he should agree on that.
Okay, well, maybe if I start with that one. I mean, Micheál Martin and Leo Varadkar are in government together. Their confidence and supply arrangement has delivered very weak government. They have jointly presided over a series of crises in ordinary people's lives, in housing, in health, in childcare provision. And so I suppose it would logically follow that they might, between them, decide when the election date is. I'm very struck at the fact that their negotiations now for the budget have commenced, and I've no doubt that you'll see a bit of theatre, a bit of pushing and shoving and posturing in that regard. But make no mistake, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil are in this very much together. What I am anxious to ensure is that Brexit isn't used as a pretext to deliver a hard budget, or for a further lurch to the right, leaving struggling working families in very, very difficult circumstances. I've heard them both talk out loud about, for example, carbon taxes. Let me just say we are absolutely opposed to any stealth tax or taxation measure that puts more pressure on families who may be back at work, want to stay back at work, but are just about making ends meet and are now increasingly anxious because of this whole Brexit debacle. Whether or not they will agree jointly on an election date is something that I will have absolutely no control over. But I would say, given that they're in government together, sure, and they'll decide budgets together, and sure, they might as well, I suppose, decide the election date as well. On the issue of Sinn Féin's message, I suppose the truth is that at the time, for a decade and more, but in recent times, when Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and the Labour Party in turn inflicted the most incredible austerity on families and communities, people understood that it was Sinn Féin that stepped forward and defended those workers, those families and those communities. And I think as the recovery dawned, I think there was a confusion on our part, and we carried the responsibility for this, for our base and for those communities and families to understand, well, what was Sinn Féin saying or doing now? And I think therefore the challenge for us is to set out that Sinn Féin is a party of solutions. And if you look to our record in the Dáil, I would defy anyone to say that anybody could match Owen O'Brien, our housing spokesperson, for bringing forward concrete, deliverable solutions to the housing crisis. I would challenge anyone to say that there is a comparator to Louise O'Reilly, our health spokesperson, in bringing forward realisable, real-world solutions to the recruitment and retention crisis in our system, to the management of waiting lists and making healthcare accessible. And I could go on through all of the portfolios, but our deficit, I believe, and we believe, is that we haven't communicated that clearly enough. I think we have sometimes also stood off our opponents, even though we are accused of being, shall we say, energetic in opposition. I think we really need to put big challenges in on the government who say that they wish stability, and I include Micheál Martin in this government lineup. They talk about stability when in fact they're delivering inertia. Whilst right across the state, in any of our constituency services today, I can guarantee you that there are people presenting at their wits' end, because they have been so badly failed. We know this through our work, and now we need to translate that in a way that is positive and front-footed and solutions-focused, and that is what we will be doing when the Dáil returns. Tracy, bear in mind that the backstop, when as initially envisaged, was an Irish backstop for the island of Ireland. It was the British government that insisted that it had to have a broader application. And then ironically, the British system said we can't have the backstop because it has a broader application. We are saying simply and clearly, as we've said from the beginning, there can be no hardening of the border. That means no hardening of the border. That means no customs, no checks. It doesn't matter where they are. No hardening of the border. There can be no material damage to the Good Friday Agreement. There has to be protections for citizens' rights. Those are the bottom lines, and those are provided for very modestly within the backstop. People have said and talked about alternatives. No viable alternative has emerged, for the simple reason that forensically, painstakingly, the backstop was landed on. It's modest. It's not perfect for us by any means, but it is the least worst option, and it is the bottom line for the island of Ireland. And I actually believe, despite DUP rhetoric to the contrary, I think broad Irish opinion, north and south, understands that and supports that. So this isn't about us stomping our feet or putting down red lines or being unreasonable. This position around the backstop is a compromise position. It is the least worst option, and it's the bare necessity, it's the minimum insurance policy that the island of Ireland needs. And really the DUP, if they were representing northern citizens and society well, would recognise that. They are very much adrift from what is the consensus position in the north, Tracy, as you know, as well as in the south.
Okay, Cormac and Daiglon, then we've got to start wrapping it up, folks.
Cormac, go ahead.
I have two questions. Firstly, do you support the idea of a Boris Bridge between Northern Ireland and Scotland? And secondly, it emerged in recent weeks that Sinn Féin got a £1.5 million donation from a mechanic who lived in a caravan who had mental health difficulties. The executors of his will were listed as two senior Sinn Féin members. Will you offer further details about how William Hampton came to be linked to Sinn Féin, or how that all came about?
Daiglon, and then we're wrapping it up.
There's been suggestions that yourselves, the Alliance Party and the SDLP should get together ahead of the looming Westminster election with a view to minimising or at least reducing the influence of the DUP in the next Parliament, which I think you would not regard as a positive influence.
Okay, well, let me start with that. It's very important that political leaders lead from the front at all times, but particularly at a time of emergency. And Brexit for us represents, we've described it before, as a constitutional earthquake. You will know in the European elections, when Martina Anderson topped the poll and was returned as MEP, that there had been a working understanding amongst Remain, not just parties but voters, and that resulted in Naomi Long being elected and Unionism losing one of their European seats, if I can put it that way. So of course there is room for thoughtful, and intelligent joint working together. What form that takes, I think we need to reflect on. But of course, it's in everybody's interest that the position of citizens in the north, which is not for Brexit, is fully reflected and reflected to the maximum in terms of the members elected. So we're very conscious of that. Other parties need to be conscious of that as well. And this is about allowing the electorate to have a full range of choice and a full opportunity to hammer home the message, just in case Boris Johnson or anybody else in Britain missed it, that we don't want Brexit. The North hasn't consented to Brexit, and that we take a very different position. On Billy Hampton, I know you've taken considerable interest in Cormac and in this story. The money that was bequeathed to Sinn Féin is in accordance with all of the rules, all of the regulations, and will be spent in accordance with all of the rules and all of the regulations. Billy Hampton, who I didn't know, so I can't speak on his behalf, but judging from what I've heard from people who did know him, he considered this to be a very robust statement against the political establishment. So he obviously saw in Sinn Féin, I can only surmise, an organisation that is four square, for Irish unity, for progress in Ireland, for peace in Ireland, but also a party that stands four square against the political establishment. So I can only say I think Billy was probably a rebel. A rebel with the cause, and he clearly shared our cause.
Folks, we've got to wrap it up now. Thanks.
Mental health difficulties.
Well, I think it's inappropriate for you to comment on anybody's mental health one way or the other. You don't know the man, and I think that's a deeply disrespectful thing to do.
Right, folks, we've got to wrap it up. Thanks very much.
Are people right in saying this is a sign that Sinn Féin are moving towards becoming a normal political party?
God forbid.
I mean, you're not a normal political party at the moment.
I think we are highly normal. I mean, my colleagues might dispute my normal status of it. No, come on. Look, where's John? Where are you? This is the height of me, can't miss it. The height back there. Look, we'll go into the Ard Fheis. We're a united party. We'll go in, we'll elect our Ard Comhairle, we'll elect our officer board, we'll elect our leadership, we'll come out to the Ard Comhairle and we'll get cracking, because there's lots and lots of work to be done. Thanks very much.